Think of the last time you were truly afraid of the dark. The feeling of a presence just beyond the light. The certainty that you are not alone. Now, imagine that feeling is the oldest truth in the universe. Long before gods bled on battlefields or titans were chained in pits of despair, there was a power so absolute that it terrified the being who would one day rule all others. It wasn't a monster with claws and teeth. It was the suffocating, eternal blackness of night itself. This is the story of Nyx, creation's first mother. But her children weren't gods of sunshine and celebration. They were the walking, breathing definitions of your deepest anxieties: death, doom, deceit, and pure misery. This isn't a myth, it's the story of what the darkness birthed when it was all alone. The first wound. Our story begins in the screaming silence before time. Before the first ray of light, before the first stirring of life, there was only chaos, a churning, gaping wound in reality. And from that cosmic wound, the first beings bled into existence. They were the protogenoi, the raw materials of reality. But alongside Gaia, the earth, and Tartarus, the abyss, something else was born. Directly from the void, Nyx, the night, uncoiled. She wasn't a passive absence of light. She was an active, consuming presence. Her brother Erebus was the static shadow, but Nyx was a moving, thinking veil of black mist. Ancient poets saw her as a nightmare figure with vast, dark wings, her face a vortex of shadow, driving a chariot pulled by two skeletal black horses. Her purpose was to drag her suffocating cloak across the heavens, quenching the light. Her home was not some glittering palace, but a dripping cave at the very edge of reality, deep within the stomach of Tartarus, a place so profoundly dark that it made the rest of the underworld feel like a sunlit field. From this pit she would rise each evening, and her daughter, Hemera, the day, would shrink back in terror, the two passing like strangers on a threshold, never to touch. But while Hemera brought fleeting warmth, Nyx's influence was eternal, because it was in this pure, unending darkness that she began to conceive. The birthing of dread. A god's legacy is in their children, but Nyx needed no partner. Alone in the crushing blackness, she spawned her brood, birthing them not from a womb, but tearing them directly from her own shadowy essence. These were not creatures you could fight with a sword. They were the inevitabilities, the horrors of the mind and spirit that no hero could ever escape. Consider her most infamous children, the twins, Hypnos and Thanatos. Hypnos was sleep, but this was not a gentle rest. It was a nightly paralysis, a surrender of the self where your body becomes a helpless vessel, vulnerable and blind. He was a constant rehearsal for the real thing. His brother, Thanatos, was death. Not the glorious death of a warrior, but the cold, silent end. He was the chilling touch on your shoulder, the quiet finality as the air leaves your lungs for the last time. He wasn't evil. He was simply the period at the end of your sentence, a final, inescapable truth. And the horrors kept coming. From her dark form, she shed Moros, the embodiment of doom. This wasn't a bad feeling. It was the chilling certainty of your own destruction, the knowledge of the exact moment your life would be extinguished. Then came Nemesis, the goddess of retribution. She was the universe balancing its books in blood. She was the force that ensured every act of pride would be met with ruin, that every king who called himself a god would end up broken and begging in the dirt. The architects of suffering. While some of her children were forces of cold order, others were simply engines of misery, designed to make the mortal world suffer. At the head of this pack was Eris, the goddess of strife and discord. It was Eris who, feeling insulted, threw a golden apple into a party of gods and sparked the Trojan War, a conflict that would see cities burned and fields soaked with blood for a decade. Eris breathed conflict. Her presence made friends turn on one another, made brothers murder brothers, and she spawned her own foul litter of horrors: toil, forgetfulness, starvation, and thousands of shrieking pains. Beside her slithered Apathy, the personification of deceit. She was the perfectly crafted lie that takes root in your mind and leads you to your own ruin. And whispering in her ear was Momus, the god of blame, who did nothing but criticize and find fault, sowing seeds of self-doubt until you collapsed under their weight. In the darkest corners of the human soul, you would always find their sister, Oasis, the goddess of misery. She was not the cause of pain, but the feeling itself. The physical, gut-wrenching anguish of absolute despair, the scream caught in your throat. The strings of fate. Then there were the Kyries. Unlike their uncle Thanatos, they were not peaceful. They were ghoulish battlefield spirits with leathery wings and razor-sharp talons, drawn to the scent of fresh blood. They were specters of violent slaughter, reveling in the carnage of war. They would swarm over the dying, not to guide them, but to feast on their last breaths and drag their terrified souls from their cooling bodies. They were the personification of a brutal, horrifying end. But the most terrifying possibility, whispered in the oldest texts, was that Nyx was also the mother of the Moirai, the Fates themselves. Clotho, who spun the glistening, fragile thread of life. Lachesis, who measured its length with cold, uncaring fingers. And Atropos, who held the shears, ready to cut it short without warning. While later myths tried to soften this by naming Zeus their father, the original horror story gives their parentage to Nyx. It's a chilling thought that the darkness from which everything came also holds the power that decides when everything will end. Your entire existence, nothing more than a thread held in the hands of night's daughters. The king who knelt to darkness. Nyx's power was not a boast, it was a fact. The ultimate proof lies in a terrifying encounter from Homer's Iliad. Hera, Zeus's wife, needed to manipulate the Trojan War behind his back, so she went to Hypnos, the god of sleep, and commanded him to render Zeus unconscious. Hypnos was paralyzed with fear. He told Hera about the last time he'd done her bidding and put Zeus to sleep. When the king of the gods awoke, his rage was unlike anything the cosmos had ever seen. He tore through the heavens, a storm of pure fury, hunting for Hypnos, intending to not just punish him, but to obliterate him. Hypnos fled, desperate, to the one place in all of creation he knew he would be safe: his mother's oppressive darkness. Zeus, crackling with thunderbolts and divine power, pursued him to the entrance of Nyx's domain. And then he stopped. The god who had wrestled titans into submission, who had slain giants, who commanded the storms and the heavens, froze. Homer tells us that Zeus, king of Olympus, stood in awe and terror of Nyx. He was afraid to take one more step, terrified of what she would do. His roaring rage was snuffed out by a cold, primordial dread. The desire for revenge vanished, replaced by the instinct for self-preservation. And so, Zeus, the most powerful being in his world, turned his back and retreated. That moment reveals the true hierarchy of the universe. Nyx needed no threats, no armies. Her power was a fundamental law. To challenge her was to challenge existence itself. In that silent, tense standoff, Nyx proved that while Zeus may rule the fleeting day, the night was eternal, and it bowed to no one. Nyx remains the most terrifying figure in all of mythology. She wasn't a villain you could defeat. She was a force of nature, as final and as neutral as a tomb. Her children are not just monsters from a story. They are the living embodiment of the truths we face every day: death, fate, misery, and strife. While the Olympians feasted, Nyx's brood was busy governing the ugly, inescapable realities of your life from the shadows. She is the chilling reminder that the oldest powers are not born of light, but of an endless, silent dark. She is the mystery that waits for you when you close your eyes, the quiet authority in the blackness of your room, and the mother of the anxieties that define your ultimate destiny. The ancient Greeks knew that the night brings both sleep and nightmares, and at the heart of it all was Nyx, the mother whose dark embrace holds every last one of us. If you were captivated by this journey into the abyss, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more tales from the darkest corners of mythology. And let us know in the comments, which one of Nyx's terrifying children do you fear meeting in the dark?